Good evening and welcome to Global Affairs TV, your hub for trade analysis and global issues. As you know, today there was a conclusion of agreement between U.S. envoys and the Chinese envoys in Switzerland concerning the removal of tariff toward China. Today, based on that escalating issue, we decided to prepare a quick audio video on U.S. decision to reduce and remove tariffs toward China. We focus on strategic, economic, and political dimensions. Before making a deep analysis in this case, I want to remind you that today, 12 May 2025, the United States of America and China achieved an historical significant milestone in their trade relationship. Following years of escalating trade tensions, marked by tight tariffs and diplomatic statements, the United States of America decided to significantly reduce tariffs in some sectors. In this vein, some tariffs on Chinese imports have been eliminated. These decisions represent a complex convergence of economic necessity, strategic recalibration, and political negotiations. This extended research and analysis-based script is informing you about strategic, economic, and political dimensions. Before analyzing in depth, let us go in the historical background and the context of the United States-China trade tensions. Here I want to remind you that the United States-China trade conflict and dispute began in earnest in 2018 under the Trump administration. Before ending his first term, Trump started a trade conflict, a trade war between the United States and America. Here, citing unfair trade practices, forced technology transfer, and intellectual property theft. Based on analysis done by the Office of the United States of America Trade Representative in 2018, the United States of America started a trade war between itself and China. The scenario was marked by the imposition of tariff quickly escalated and affecting statistically nearby 550 billion of goods. In retaliation, China, with duties on U.S. agricultural and industrial export. Here the point to retain is that after imposing tariffs on a Chinese product, China retaliated with agricultural and industrial export from the United States, just as an embargo or as an excessive retaliation. This has marked an economic crash, which was one of the most consequential since the end of World War II. And this has deeply affected the global market, not only United States of America and China, but the rest of the world. However, a major negative effect is the disruption of global supply chains and infrastructure cycle. But after the end of the first term of Donald Trump, the Biden administration preserved many tariffs while seeking multilateral pressure on China through the G7 and the WTO, as we have analyzed in the first video on China or on G7 and the BRICS. However, by late 2024, tariffs reached at 145% on certain Chinese goods. These statistics was given by a United States Statistical Office in 2024. In light with the above background, we have realized that today, at the 12th May 2025, China and United States has reached an agreement on the reduction, even on the removal of some terms of tariff. What our audience can maintain and retain their mind is that some key component in this agreement includes tariff reductions, Chinese concessions, quarterly review, and sector-specific lenience. According to the British Broadcasting Agency, the United States of America, average tariff now has been lowered from 145% to 30% on over 500 Chinese product categories. You have to know that. The second you have to know, as a compensation or a Chinese position, there was what we can call Chinese concession. In this regard, China has dropped, in today's agreement, China has dropped its retaliatory tariff from 125% to only 10%, especially on the United States agricultural product and the higher tech component. When you say higher tech component, we say higher technology products from the United States. Their tariff have been lowered from 125% to only 10%. That is a concession given by Chinese government. Thirdly, there was a conclusion on a quarterly review. Both parties, bilateral representatives, meaning representative from the United States of America and representatives from the China, agreed on a bilateral task force. They has just established a bilateral task force hosted under World Trade Organization supervision. It will review progress quarterly, meaning under supervision of World Trade Organization, a bilateral task force established between the United States of America and China will review progressively quarterly every 3 months. Every 3 months. Every 3 months. There will be a review on the progress, on the tariff removal, on the tariff reduction, on Chinese concession, what he has agreed. Fourthly and finally, as a key component, is sector-specific relief. Here we mean that the agreement has focused on electronics, renewable energy equipment, semiconductors, and food commodities, meaning that these products in these sectors will be the more focus in reduction, in removal, and in concession. Let us show you in the following paragraph how tariff reduction will be applicable even today from 2024 to 2025. After showing you that graph illustrating how tariff reductions will be applied, let us talk on the motivations behind the United States decisions. As you remember, or as you have been listening, the Trump administration has decided to increase taxes on Chinese product and on the product of other countries like Canada, Mexico, and product from European Union. But it is questionable why China, albeit why the United States of America has been decided to engage in talks and agreement with China on the removal and on the reduction on a tariff, as it was in the manifesto of Donald Trump. The first motivation behind this decision is domestic economic pressure. In the United States, inside the United States, there is a domestic economic pressure. For instance, in 2024, there was a higher inflation, which pushed the United States of America, the Chinese product initiatives, to 6.3% due to import costs. Owing to the import costs, the American states was pushed to reduce the tax due to higher inflation. Another illustrative example is how the United States manufacturing sectors suffered owing to higher prices of intermediate goods. These high prices of intermediate goods stimulate the United States manufacturing sector to suffer from that. Another motivation was the business lobbying. As you know, the big business companies, especially tech giants such as Apple, Nvidia, lobbies heavily for tariff relief to restore their supply chains. In reality, these companies has suffered from inflation, and they put pressure on the US government to restore their supply chain through the reduction for tariff relief. The third motivation, which led to the US engagement in talks with China, is geopolitical realignment. In this context, I can point that with the growing conflict involving Russia, China, Israel, and energy insecurity, the United States of America has recalibrated its global priorities, softening its stance on China. This led to the US authorities to focus on the role, on the importance of China in global trade. In the morning, I have watched an interview on CNN held between the journalists and the Treasury Secretary of the United States, called Janet Yellen. He said that the American consumer was paying the price for political brinksmanship. After those three motives which led to the United States to engage in talks and agreement with China, Reuters, on the other hand, pinpoints on the Chinese incentives for concession. As you remember in the introduction, we have been saying about the Chinese concession after US accepted to reduce and to remove some tariffs. Here, China decided to provide some incentives for concession due to four main points. The first one is economic deceleration. Here, when we talk economic deceleration, for instance, in terms of the GDP growth of China at the 4.2% in the first quarter of 2025 this year, China needed export recovery. I have watched the China NBC today, and the journalists and the China Secretary of Financial and Trade Affairs accepted that China needed export recovery. This was the source from China NBC. The second point, incentive for concession, is that the trade diversification pressure. China is also faced by trade diversification. Back to the year 2020, in the post-COVID, the ASEAN, an Asian region organization, economic blocks, and the Indian market could not fully compensate for the US demand at the territory of China. This put pressure to the Chinese government to provide some incentive for concession to the United States. The third one, is the technological accessibility to technology. Here, Chinese chip making and EV industries require US patent and machinery, pushing policymakers to compromise. These put policymakers to compromise in order to have access to technology in the terms of patent and the machinery. The fourth one and the last is soft power and the global image of the China. From here, the move was framed domestically and internationally as a diplomatic maturity. The China needed to lead and to influence the world and to enhance its image at the international arena. This motivated China for concessions. After analyzing Chinese incentives for concession, let us look on immediate economic impacts that will be seen as a result of this agreement concluded between China and the United States of America today at Geneva, Switzerland. The first one is market responses. Supply and product of 500 rose about 4.2% within 5 trading days. For instance, Apple with more than 6%, CARICOM with more than 7.5%, Tesla with more than 80%, Larry the Post announcement today after announcing a concluded agreement between the United States of America and the China. The total market share of Apple, CARICOM, Tesla have raised Another typical example is soybean futures, which increased at 3.8% on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. The Chicago Stock Exchange of Market soybean futures increased by 3.8%. Before I continue, let us show you some comment given today in an interview clip with Bloomberg panel on global trade. The Bloomberg panel on global trade today, after the conclusion of agreement trade deal between China and the US, an interview has been given. Let us give you some illustration. By commenting on this illustration, trade expert such as former World Trade Organization Director General Pascal Lamy asserted that the United States of America Trade Representative Catherine Tai and the Chinese Vice Commercial Minister Wang Shuen discussed the motivations and expected outcome of the 2025 trade detente. Trade representatives of the United States, Lamy, today has emphasized on multilateralism's return to the global stage. Do you remember in the first video of BRICS and G7? Now the United States of America is stepping to accept multilateralism, multipolar system. However, on the other hand, the Chinese Vice Commercial Minister Tai Shueng highlighted that tariff flexibility is being associated with environmental cooperation, suggesting future agreement, future accord, which will bundle trade with green tech development. This expert panel underscore how political pragmatism and economic self-interest covered to trigger the tariff shift. Do you understand? I think you know and you understand why and which economic impact emanate immediately after conclusion of agreement between China and the United States of America. Then, after immediate impact, let us analyze long-term strategic implications. In these contexts, we remark the globalization trends. This U.S.-China agreement will lead to the reorganization trends of global trade. Here, the WTO and the CPTPC involvement like to deepen, meaning that on the one hand, World Trade Organization as a Western, a Bretton Woods allied institutions, and the CPTPP as the BRICS or the East allied institutions will engage cooperatively to deepen this global trade, to deepen this trade deal between the United States and China. The second long-term strategic implication is technology dialogue. Here, there will be an opportunity, a chance in artificial intelligence, a chance in EVs and G6, Generation 6, and climate tech. Thirdly, there will be a military de-escalation prospect. Here we want to say that trade cooperation between China and the United States of America will temper aggression over Taiwan or the South China Sea. Let us show you in this figure how projected trade growth between 2025 and 2028 will happen due to this agreement between the United States and China. Here, I give you this figure based on the analysis and the scenario given by World Trade Organization in this May for all. After seeing that scenario model, let us show you how financial advice and business implication will result from this agreement. For instance, for business and investors, there will be a huge investment in the beneficiary sector, such as renewable tech, semiconductors, such as renewable techs, semiconductors, and logistics. In terms of supply chain resilience, there will be a mixed sourcing between China, ASEAN as an economic bloc in Asia, and North America expressed in its economic bloc known as NAFTA. Thirdly, there will be a forex risk management through hedging tools to offset United States of America dollar and China-Russia currencies volatility. Finally, there is a government guarantee which will leverage U.S. Inflation Reduction Act incentives tied to reshored manufacturing. Let us show you a table or a graph reflecting on the Morgan Stanley analyst on the trade and market. After having that scenario at the position of Morgan Stanley as analyst on the trade and market, let us see retain only 3 key points on critical perspectives. Critically, after concluding agreement between the United States of America and China in Geneva, the United States bipartisan members of Congress, here we mean Democrats and Republican representatives at the U.S. Congress, urges that the agreement lacks enforcement mechanism. Just they need to strengthen and pinpoint agreement mechanism in order to be enforced. Congressmen cited and addressed the issues. Just representatives of both parties, Democrats and Republican, are now criticizing that the trade deal between China and the United States lacks to address intellectual property right, lacks to specify on state subsidies given by China to its state-owned enterprises. And they criticized about the cyber intrusion. It is on the side of congressmen in the United States of America. But on the other hand, at the global level, the Nobel-winning economist Paul Krugman urged that economic war or trade war was provoking costlier than anticipated. The escalation is not weakness but realism, he said. After understanding my reflection and analysis on a trade deal concluded between the United States of America and China, let us give you my own concluding remarks. I have remarked that this 2025 U.S.-China tariff deal is a turning point in the 21st century trade diplomacy or economic diplomacy in other terms. This trade deal reflects a shared recognition that economic decoupling is impractical in a light integrated global system, meaning that the deal underscores the role of balancing competition with cooperation. As I have discussed in the previous video, now there is a turning point about multipolar system and cooperation. If this agreement becomes a model for resolving other international dispute or conflict, as well as collapses under future political shift, it will shape global trade decades and decades. Thank you for understanding, for following. Now, comment on this audio, share, subscribe in order to have more analysts on global issues. Thank you very much.